welcome. I would like to maybe make a video where I kind of go through my research a little bit and get to like essentially just a little background on what I want to talk about more in this video, just like a conduit to go through. So in 2014, I quit my job at the patent office where I was a patent examiner in the fuel cells and battery art unit at the United States Patent and Trademark Office. I was a chemical engineer. I did not want to be. And the patent office was my out, and that's what I did. And I thought about other things, and then until one day I realized how gravity causes both all distant redshifted galaxies and magnetic fields simultaneously, which was essentially when I quit my job. Is actually after I quit my job because I had enough realizations where I was like, okay, I quit. It's like, oh my God, that's something that's not been considered, and that's definitely important. And then next thing I know, I'm just quitting my job. Like immediately, I can't do anything for the job. I'm just doing this, and I just quit. And I was like, well, let me start like telling the people, oh, look at this. People are like, well, what are your credentials? Let me like they read a little bit. It's because it's like, and it's in its infancy. It's like gaga goo goo. So people read it. Gaga goo goo. Oh, don't trust him as a source. And then every time I reach out, as I like amend and add detail, like everyone who's encountered me, gaga goo goo, like the basically the incomprehensible origins of my theory, which really aren't that incomprehensible. Like they're solid, but they're not like as in depth as they've become. Which like this video right here, that's why this I made this playlist. I mean to open the playlist, view playlist, where I just put in like here's my original 2015 video. So I quit my job. I wrote a research paper, which is visible here on my website, cascadinguniverse.org. For some reason, I did .org. Writings, or probably research papers. Universal Principle of Natural Philosophy. This is my original paper. The reason I call it this is because it's based on classical mechanics. It's just purely classical mechanics with the added concepts of infinity and that particles can be ever larger and ever smaller. And like once that, and that they can pass through one another, like neutrinos can pass through the earth. The concept that a particle can physically pass through another particle, once that was accounted for in classical mechanics, that basically is the theory of everything sought after, at least in its infancy. That's and then these are, as it's written in the Cosmos, this is based on my book, which I wrote in 2018, which is, at least I compiled and wrote like from articles I had already written, mostly on just like magnetic fields of life. So like it's not just physical objects that have magnetic fields, but like is this information offensive, then it's opposing your field. And so it's causing a resistance because we literally see things so differently that to encounter the field that you are encountering right now listening to me causes repulsion or attraction. If you're like, yeah, I feel that. I can or even see that already. Pardon me, people who are well aware of things I talk about as if I'm like the discoverer thereof. Look at me, the source. Everyone this way. Everything this way. Fields of view, like zooming in, so we see the detail like through a microscope, but we don't see the bigger picture. That's kind of what we do in science, is we zoom in to the point where like we're looking at something in detail, but that's all we're looking at, is that something like that little pixel. Maybe we got a little bit of like peripheral view because we had to zoom in to get there, but we've been really focused, so we've lost the like, it's more just like memory than like looking around because we're really focused. So, or zooming out so much that we really aren't seeing the subtleties, smaller like nuances of like the, like I do that where I'm like, you guys have like things going on. Like, this is all I'm doing. I'm like a fucking boulder that is just flowing through unrelenting, like path, barely able to be deflected. Really not like zoomed in enough to like, okay, now I see what I'm like doing. Lens of our focus, like what we focus on, causes those things to grow in energy, like money. Like when we as a society choose to focus on like, oh yeah, money's awesome. Money's just must be a thing. Silly ancient people not having money. We learned so much across time. Okay, I'm just mocking it because it's actually detrimental in the long term. From an engineering standpoint, it causes entropy loss because it's a conversion of energy. We're like, oh, I'm gonna do this and get that money, and then take that money and get that thing, and then we're converting our energy into that thing through this inefficient path, not optimal. So just saying, that's why I mock it, because it's fucking not logical. It's not logical in the long term. Like, we gotta, obviously, in the short term, like, it has a place until we as a people like get the crutch, I guess, out of there. Like, okay, gravity of attraction. All right, and besides the point, I didn't want to get too caught up on this. These are my videos on that kind of concept, and then 6 and 7, pointedly, these are more on the physics, the big assumption, the assumption that all distant redshifted galaxies is caused by motion leads to the Big Bang model, which leads to expansion of space and dark energy then. Whereas I show it's an assumption and could be caused by gravity potentially, and therefore it's an assumption and it's a big one because it leads to all these other things. It's not just some like, okay. And then decomposing the standard models. Like, we take all these observations, we conglomerate them, we put them under heat and pressure and form solid, stable systems, but they're not. Everything is relative, so they're not that stable. In the presence of a higher energy, more solid, stable idea, it just melts and decomposes to its constituents that then can become part of a different viewpoint that is literally more in line with the truth, towards the truth, which is never able to be absolutely reached, only relatively more reached. And perhaps at the expense of untruths, where really the truth is in the center somewhere. And the more we like go towards it, the more we go out of center. So we find like partial truths, half truths, and then utterly half truths. But that wraps around to the other side, like zero and infinity are the same. Okay, so this is like all physics though, and mind you, all the way back here 2014 2015 I was talking about, by the way, this provides a mechanism for the expanding earth model. So this is very important. Is the earth expanded from a smaller landmass and does not function under plate tectonics, and it expanded much more like this, not maybe not 4,000, more like Krishna when Dwarka was attacked, kind of time frame. Although maybe that period took longer than I realized, and like the flood was a year, but that was maybe at a different point. Besides the point, I don't want to propose things that are maybes in my mind that I'm just thinking of right now, just because it causes people who are like, what in the, why would he ever suppose that? That just goes to show, and it doesn't go to show whatever it is they're thinking it goes to show. But it's then I try to like do this, and now I'm like combative, and maybe it's good to bring back to mind this thing where there's this like tension that occurs in instances like that, and it's beneficial to acknowledge like this dude does acknowledge an aspect of reality that is unaccounted for, that there is a physics of consciousness, that these magnetic fields between our conscious interactions are real and occur, and it's like largely are why no one will listen to me is because I reach out with an alternative counter viewpoint to how we generally see things, like plate tectonics, like the Big Bang, like quantum mechanics, like general relativity, and I say no this, and people are like, I don't like that because I've already established in my mind that, and these are counter, and thus we encounter the magnetic fields of life manifesting, and I deal with it on the daily, and that's how I know about it. It's not like I just like came up with it. I literally found the theory of everything, understood the nature of reality sufficiently to begin to like attempt blah blah blah, put it out into the physical world, where then other conscious beings began to interact in ways where I observed in my experience that there were such things, and started to realize there is a physics of consciousness. And partly that anyway, unfortunate truth is that's what happened, is I attempted to share these things, and people generally just simply, because it's a different viewpoint, had a different viewpoint, and just naturally were inclined to a repulsive magnetic field interaction when I proposed the things I had to say. Okay. But then, this is a very important, this one I put in here for the evolution of a theory. Then we kind of get through to this stage where I start to look more and more into the earth, and it's not really evident in here, but just in my writings and just into the expanding earth in general. Like, if we go to Steemit, my Steemit, I have a lot of articles here, and I'll, like, Dwarka starts around here. This is when it doesn't give a date. Oh, okay. March 27th, I discovered Dwarka thereabouts on bathymetric data. This right here is ancient Dwarka. I don't know why it's not acknowledged yet, but it's ancient Dwarka. And what that did was it set off a chain of events where I started to pay more close attention to just simply the region of the region, because I was just thinking the earth expanded and how did it happen. And so, like, ocean floor age cross, this was my general focus of how I determined sequence, was based on the ocean floor age. I said, because the earth expanded, all the continents were together, like none of the ocean floor existed. And what first was formed was here. So a crack started here first, and then it went down this way between North America and Africa, and then it cut across this way, and it went out into the Pacific where this occurred, which then led to the earth expanding. And I didn't have much detail. Like, I mostly went, like I said, over like the surface. Like, I was like, well, there's an arc here, there's an arc here. This arc even has an eddy at the tails. This one's more distinguishable, but it's still over here. Like, we can see at least this portion. And this one, interestingly, collides with this one. Mind you, because the earth expanded, it means India was here. Like, the concept that India moved here is not true. It's just the earth expanded. India was connected, as they say, in like a Pangea kind of way. Let me pull up Pangea. Like, down here, it's just the Tethys Ocean really did not exist, or it significantly was closed up to a point where it essentially didn't exist. I believe this is more so just continental or mantle emissions that came out in the region of the Himalayas between India when all this occurred, but that show evidence that lead to us saying there was an ocean, basically, but there wasn't, and it was a single landmass where. And I've established this in my videos. I have established this based on the magnetic anomaly maps and interpreting them to be based on currents. This map, I have well established in my underground science videos. And that's part of it. I work through what it all is, what it all means. Like, there's no like arrows here. Like, if I suppose, so this is what happened is, I saw in India this feature, and I said, what if? Actually, this was after this. I noticed this nova here, and I noticed this boundary was broken, and this circle, which people may consider like craters to be from space, but the reality is almost every crater on Earth, if not every, most of them, I know some of them are actually craters from impacts, but most of them are formed from currents underground, under the crust, that essentially, when the mantle was punctured, it released this by a storm that was intense enough and made by a vortex weapon to attack ancient Dwarka in the times of actually the Mahabharata. So not in radiometric dating times. That's why this video is important, is because it's like, dudes, radiometric dating isn't even constant. Or radioactive decay isn't even constant. It's established, although people who want to maintain that's the problem, is it gets a lot of pushback because people do what magnetic fields do. They repel. They're like, oh, push. They push it. They push back. And they say no. They say no, 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 no. This seasonal fluctuation of, let me just pull this up. This seasonal variation in the radiometric decay rates, it's not real. It's not real. Push back. Why? Because they already have a narrative, and the significance of this is too much to just accept it. They're like, ah, didn't you know radiometric dating is constant? It's well established. That's why we use it to date things, because it's constant. Exactly. That's why we use it to date things, because we want to date things using this method, but it's established here to be seasonally dependent. But people have, I pointed this out to people in a geology subreddit, and they're like, oh, they're like, where's your evidence? And I literally, someone's like, well, I just basically responded like, what are you guys doing? It's pretty much a circle jerk here. Like, you realize you're wrong though, because they were just talking shit on someone, like posted someone's comment. Oh, blah, 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 blah. This person thinks the earth is 5,000 years old. And I'm like, you know the earth expanded, right? Oh my god. And it did so recently. They're actually more accurate than you guys. They were just talking shit. But I pointed it out. I just casually responded, and I was like, also it is, and radiometric dating is not actually a valid method, because it's, and I didn't like go into detail, but they're like, where's your evidence? And oh yeah, say that, but where's your evidence? And I just linked this paper. I was like, literally, where's your evidence, bro? And hilariously, the paper is titled "Evidence for." It's literally titled up, and so what do? What does anyone whose magnetic fields are repelling the information and wants to push back enough to reject it and not allow it into their consciousness do? They say, God, where's that? They casually look at the paper. They're like, let me look at this paper. Where did I put it? Where did I put it? There it is. They go like this. And they look around like citations. I don't know. I don't know how they found it. They basically found rebuttals to this paper and start to find rebuttals. There's rebuttals. These rebuttals are clearly more valid than this one, even though this one did the research, and these rebuttals are just people who mad. People who mad. It's not the same, dudes. You gotta understand that people who mad gonna react in that way because that's magnetic field, so there's just repulsion occurring. A pushback occurring is manifesting in the physical world where the conscious interactions, one of them says like they're like, oh, look at this evidence for that's, and I don't even think they in any way, like, what's the word, throw shade on the theory that radiometric dating is a valid method for dating the Earth. But it doesn't matter because it does it in and of itself by being evidence for correlations between the nuclear decay rates and the Earth Sun distance. So it shows what science says. Understand this. What science says is decay rates are constant. The end. What I say is, no, they're not. They depend on an environment such as the distance to the sun. I mean, that would be probably changing the environment it's in, like in terms of like subtle energies, depending on the distance. So yeah, like this shows like so let's say the Earth itself underwent a supernova on a planetary scale where energy from outside came into the Earth, within the Earth, like space, through a vortex storm, bringing space down a column like an eye of a storm into the Earth, that then physically flowed down into all the way to the moho and then punctured the moho and just filled up the Earth like a balloon until causing mantle to upwell, causing the crust to basically experience stress, so that at any weak points of boundaries between like adjacent systems that are more like one with themselves than the other system, like North America and South America, like all the continents, how the continents separated wasn't just random, but was based on how they were arranged within the single system. They were one system, but arranged in a way where they were effectively like had different components, so that when energy propagated through it, those different components separated towards where they would be. Potential spam? Okay, so but then I discovered, so basically I was like, okay, the Earth expanded, it did so rapidly, and it did so like a supernova, which is like radioactive, like essentially an activation energy occurred. Activation energy. So that's the thing, is there's so many like cross-disciplinary considerations that can be made that haven't been made necessarily. So like that the Earth required an activation energy. No, I shouldn't have clicked it, I guess. Where with a sufficient activation energy, then it could proceed from a certain equilibrium of like pre-expansion, post-expansion, where now it's at a new equilibrium. So the activation energy was there, and it requires that. So it requires a storm sufficient to bring enough energy to literally cause the activation energy for the Earth itself to basically swell enough to fracture the continents, to split them, to then cause all these things, which I talk about in this video. And then I noticed, oh yeah, I noticed, so Dwarka found, and then I noticed Mount Gurnar. Because I don't know much about India. I'm just looking at this area, generally speaking. I'm like, this area is interesting. This area, like, it's kind of like over here. Like, I don't know. I can look at it. Like, this is interesting, but I don't even know anything over here, really. This is reminiscent of Gur National Forest Park. But over here, I just was like, this is a hexagon. So it just drew my attention so much so that I was interested enough in it to start to really research it. And also that there's this phi ratio spiral here. This caught my attention. So like, I'm like, there really does seem to have been a storm here. Like, I don't know. Mind you, I didn't. Let's go back to this. Before I, as a patent examiner, like up until I was a patent examiner, I was an atheist. And then somewhere along the line, leading up to here, I became agnostic, but I really never entertained the possibility of like validity in scripture. Okay. Until I discovered the theory of everything and saw it to be based off of Isaac Newton's research, which he spent most of his life researching prophecy. So it really made me be like, what is going on here? Enough to look into it, and to the point where I'm like, it does look like this flood thing probably could have happened like when the Earth expanded. Like if the Earth expanded and our radiometric dating is invalid, and that's why this is important. That's why this is so significant. This paper, it shows just the mere fact that it shows that radiometric dating is not a valid method for absolute dating of rock. It's a valid method for relative ages, but not absolute ages. At least in our perception of time as humans, maybe. But it's not a valid method, therefore, at all for absolute aging. So it could be that the Earth radioactively decayed itself, because a supernova is the radioactive decay, it's considered, of all the atoms simultaneously. So it's basically, importantly, it's fractal in nature. So a supernova is a radioactive decay of all the atoms, because it is it literally is radioactive decay on a different scale. And so when we look at it, we see just this bunch of radioactive decay, just radioactive decay. So it just is that. Which makes me think of like Io, I think is like sulfur. It's like very highly sulfur and some other element. So it's almost like it's like a bond between like a big sulfur and some other element. Okay. So like because of this, that's how significant this is. That's why it's difficult for the geological community to acknowledge, because it's so impactful that it basically opens the door for such a spectrum of potentials that they're unwilling to open the door to, because we've established the earth to be hundreds of millions, billions of years old, when it's really not. And here's why, kind of thing. And but this thing, it basically, the earth expanded in a supernova. So like a supernova of a star is a supernova. A supernova of a planet is not a supernova. It's kind of like an electron supernovas, and it's called an excited electron. And radioactive decay is when an atom supernova. So this nova, this general like explosion of a system, when activation energy is input, and compressed energy, it seems to be trapped, like an inflow of energy with no outflow potential, because it's like flowing inward to some center trap point that then explodes outward from it because of the pressure that builds there, kind of thing. So it novas across scale. So planets nova too, and probably have been seen and not understood to be. I haven't found anything that I've like, this is probably planetary supernovas or planetary novas. We just don't think planets can nova, like, but they definitely can. Okay, let's keep going. Then that drew me into Mount Gurnar enough where like suddenly I was making this video. Just suddenly, like, it took me like a week to make this video, an hour long, like very, very good video to watch. To not Definitely needs to be seen if someone's considering my research, but also needs to be seen from a viewpoint that I acknowledge is not all completely true, but it's also a very good starting point for like the information surrounding what's going on. And then here I kind of go into that, like, well, here, let me address some things real quick, like dates to these mountain ranges especially, and like lining things up in a more sequential way, because even though radiometric dating is not a valid method for absolute ages, like we can't be like 66 million years is actually how much time passed since something that radiometric dating says to be 66 million years old, because it literally is not. That's not actually the truth, but it is the like older than something that we date to be like 60 million, and younger than something that we date to be 70 million. Like, it really is a valid method of getting good relative ages of things for sequence. It's just when we say, okay, and then that amount of time that we've established to have passed is what passed, and then try to like overlay that onto the earth and say, okay, let's look at the earth, assume, like, insert that time. What that didn't actually pass, that's the problem. It didn't pass. It wasn't there at all. It's only been like, let's say 10,000 plus or minus a couple thousand years since this occurred, since the earth expanded, because how it expanded is in fact written of in the Mahabharata. It was attacked by a vortex weapon. Ancient Dwarka was attacked by a vortex weapon that caused what's known in the Egyptian mythology as the Doom Shape, which I write about and put here. And it physically traveled this way. So that's part of what I was saying, is that video is not that great, but it's still really solid, like entry point into a lot of the information. where I say it traveled, the storm went this way just because it kind of looked like it. Now I've realized this is for sure like chakras of a shalogram. Real quick. Shalograms, like these things. This is kind of like the Gulf of Kutch, and this is the kind of like the shalogram feature. Or maybe this is like the Gulf, the side that's all like that. Maybe that's more representative of that side. But like, there's an actual chakra here sideways on the ground because the storm came this way and then down this way, and then when it was over here it was putting a current through between these systems that weren't quite the same material, so this was just a good location for current to flow. And it was flowing this way, causing an actual vortex here. Which led to shallogram features, because that's how shallograms are formed, is by currents flowing. Like, this is not a fossil. It's caused by currents that were flowing in this rock in a similar manner, where there's a current cutting across and like causing a vortex, causing nodes like this structure to occur, and just carving out this shape by the current being composed of a subtle enough particle relative to the dense surroundings to just create like a void, a space, kind of like here. And then it bursts through sometimes, like just like here. It literally bursts open. Like, initially it wasn't open. It physically caused the current to flow through here, create a vortex that then carved along the edges like shallograms. Like this, just along the very edge, but it didn't take out the whole piece, but here it actually chunked out beyond the edge to a point where there's just this opening. Okay. And then this one is much more related to prophecies and what I believe to be Judgment Day, honestly. That's just the truth. That's what I believe to be Judgment Day. Is the planetary supernova of Mercury, which then causes Venus to become the new Earth, and Earth to become the new Mars, and Mercury to become the new Venus. Long story. Some other things like Earth from a different angle. This one's, for being a 5-minute video, is very good. Like, and I don't say a word. I just point out, here's an image, 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 here's an image for 5.5 minutes of just angles of Earth. Literally just angles. Look at this angle, look at this angle, look at this angle, look at this angle. Isn't that curious? What's up with that? Non-random distribution of impact craters is very important. Like, they're not actually randomly distributed as impact craters would suggest to be if they're impact craters. They're actually not random, and here's why, kind of thing. Shallograms are not fossils. Really big shallograms, these ones, to the point where I'm like, maybe not actually to a point of this one though. Although I found even bigger than this one. The whole Earth is a shallogram. It's crazy. It's crazy. The whole Earth is one of these shallograms. With this feature, with this feature, with this feature, with this feature. All of it. It's a shallogram. It's crazy. Most visible here. Here's that opening. And the reason I say that with confidence is because there's a nova here and then a nova here. These are all underground, mind you, but they're still causing surface features and effects. All the current under the continental crust is at times novaing, causing other features on in terms of how like the layout of this layer ended up being. It may be that this entire layer that caused this map to be so prominent like overwhelms every other features layer that makes like so that there is no other anomaly in the magnetic grid or whatever, where mostly the current coming out of the puncture hole here. Here's Dwarka, the vortex weapon, I believe. I believe it sat like here for a while. It really sat here and just fed energy into here. Just like drilling into this region. Perhaps down through, like even down under through. Just through. Maybe. But especially for sure across this polygon boundary where it just started to carve downward, which is really where that feature is like here. Mind you, there was a earthquake that uplifted this 200 years ago. Right here, this whole stretch 200 years ago uplifted to cause this river to no longer connect to this river. It used to go through here, and there was like a fort here. So, like, recent occurrences there very proximal to this underlying structure's boundary, which I find of interest, that it upwelled. So maybe if there is an outflow of energy coming from here, it would upwell that region a little bit more there. So that's evolution of a theory, and then I just put in, I guess did I put in every single one of these? I just was like, and underground science. They're very important. The thing is, it's just like everything else, where things I say, if someone listens to too little, will be easy enough to just stop listening by hearing them, especially when it takes like many videos to even come to a better conclusion that's more persuasive. That's like that thing that people would have thought definitely does not occur anymore, but they're not making it to that point. So there's a lot of those kinds of issues, but I feel it's very important. I just walk through this map. Like I'm like, I start looking at this map like, what if this is currents that cause this? Like, this is just remnants of currents that stopped flowing, that left behind their flow patterns. Like, there's no arrows to suggest exactly what's going on, but like I literally just started to work it out, the chain reaction of novae, and that's like the physics of consciousness is part of it. Like, it really is the chain reaction of novae, and I'm just displaying it here in a way. Boom goes the trilobite. I found a really large trilobite in this video. That's like, it's not a fossil either. These things are so big that it really draws into question, are they fossils at all? But then I just work through this. And along the way, there's more. Like down here, they really start to get to a point like these ones. In terms of Gurnar, I'm really Gurnar focused. Like these are interesting here. There's so many things. This one's really. I'm proud of this one's contents. Not so proud of the times I'm an ass in all my videos, but hey. Oh god. And then this playlist though is more focused. Like, okay, this video for sure. This one because it's 5 minutes. This one because it's probably pretty important. I didn't actually rewatch it, like when I put it on this playlist, to get an idea if I really wanted it on the playlist. But it seems that it's probably important as it was building into this kind of stuff. And then this one's really good, although I'm an ass at the end. Oh, no. Now that you've seen this is of importance, here's some information on where you can find more information. And, this is interesting. These are all Gurnar. I started recording so many times, I don't even know what I've said in this recording. I'm not gonna publish those because I just stopped talking and restarted over and over. But maybe, I don't know if I want to continue in this video talking about some specifics I was thinking about. Current induced mounds. Maybe it's good that I wrote that. I don't agree with this. Imprints of subterranean Gurnar hexagonal extension to mantle plug. I'm not. Although maybe it's possible. I don't think so though. I think it's just straight up current based. It's surface. It's nothing to do with this. This is a mistake. That's a good example. This is a mistake, and now it's there, and people see me making the video, like doing that, putting it in, using it in the videos without changing it. They're like, what imprint of something? Like, it's not. It's caused by currents. It's caused by currents. I've established that. Now I remember more thoroughly in my own head than to a point where I'm like, it is caused by currents and not this. Okay, because I was just more so thinking there's a hexagon here. Maybe somehow it connects over here. Maybe it shows it here for some reason. Maybe it shows it here. That was my thoughts. But then I started to think more about why this feature was here in this. And that's why I just call it boundary, because up arrows, because there's currents coming. There's a general current coming this way that then goes upward this way, meeting downward currents that then produces basically boundaries, especially this one that's rounded. Okay, so anyway, I was thinking about this, so I guess maybe I'll stop this video now and get more into specifics. Maybe, did I say everything? I don't even know what my purpose was. making this video. I've been doing a lot of research. I'm really distracted by a lot of things going on. Who knows what's going on in my life? Fuck. But yeah. Cool. I guess that's fine. Alright then. I'll be just hitting record again, probably, and talking about Gur National Forest, which, by the way, I cannot find any papers on. It is a struggle. The ones I have found are behind paywalls for no reason, even though they're from 1930. University of Chicago. I think it's this one. I did find this. This is interesting. That's right. I did find this. This is all I found. Basalt here. Hard to tell what this says. Here. I'm not sure. Pillows? Porous? No, I don't know what that means. Polis. It looks like Pollous maybe. And fine grain limestone. And conglomerates. So it's some type of limestone that is probably related to its grain size that I cannot make out and don't know enough to actually just interpret it. Polis grained. Is it actually a thing? Okay, not a thing. Rhyolitic. So this is relevant for if that's here. It's hard to say if that's actually what's going on here. Yeah, it must be. Okay, yeah. This is rhyolites, which is important when it comes to Alec Hills over here have rhyolites predominantly in this region of the non-basalt rocks. Also a ring of granophyre, which is like Mount Granard has, so that's of interest for sure. Granophyre and mostly in Barda Hills. A little surprising there's not granophyre here. If there's granophyre here, it's a little surprising there's not here. To a substantial degree, I think there is a little bit. Purple, okay, maybe that. It's hard to say if that's that or if that's the limestone one. Or maybe that one even. That might be granophyre. But it's still not within. This is the Gur National Forest region here, north of Talala. Like here, pretty much. Probably this basalt section, and also it extends this way, though. Like there. Limestone deposited. In the Pleistocene, which is, I believe, very recent. Yeah, this one, the one just before the most recent, which is maybe the Holocene, is what we're in now. Yeah, current. Okay. Yes. Yeah, that's the person talking to you. You don't know we're in the Holocene, dude. Just confirming. So in the just before recently there was limestone, and then in the more recent there was fluvial. So like basically wind and water deposits, it looks like. And maybe a sea, like because of a flood. So maybe the flood didn't happen until the earth expanded. Like it was the rapid expansion. Like the early expansion maybe was more so not yet flooding per se, or at least not globally. Although there was water. I know I was reading one of these papers. Maybe I can find it. Maybe this one. This one. Paleoclimate. Flood basalt structures. Sarastra. Basically showing these features, which are really interesting. Let me just pause here. I was reading this paper. Flood basalt structures and textures as guides to cooling histories in paleoclimates. Maybe I can go through this paper in more detail because I really did read it closely to try to understand what is going on, because I hadn't seen much discussion like this kind of structure just like hanging out here. Just hanging out. Colonnade entablature. Colonnade is much more orderly. Entablature is much more one of these that. So essentially, they seem to have concluded, I believe, if I'm remembering this right, is essentially this region. Anything that looks like this did not have water flow through it, but like formed in a similar manner to this when the basalts were flowing. So this is like a lava that is like in Hawaii, a pillow or a Pahoho lava that can have different types of formations form on the top, where like then they begin to break apart and essentially either form orderly or more and more disorderly depending on the environment. And if it's rainy, if there's water that is believed to, so essentially not just river water, but just like rain. They specifically suggest like a rain. So like this vortex storm maybe is also causing it to rain over top of it, that then is penetrating through but not reaching in certain areas to create these types of features. There's all sorts of interesting things in this paper. I'm not even sure why I was bringing this up. But these features, I gotta find them. This also is like meters. These are meters in diameter, these columns. And they're along the riverbed. Mind you, these riverbeds I strongly believe to be called, well, like where currents flowed. So I'm thinking a current flowed here, causing vortices over here energetically that were just more able to form larger stable systems in this region. Like there was just a flow here, a river, and this region was more stable. It was more just sitting there, hanging out, while the more dense current, just a faster flowing current, like a river, carved through the basalt flow that was solidifying. As it solidified, it started to like create regions that just didn't have quite as much flow. And I'm sorry, pardon me. So I was thinking maybe there's some relationship to why those are so big. Okay, but then there is I gotta find them. This is also interesting. All of it's interesting, this whole paper. Here they are. This one reminded me very much of, mind you, these are all just in the same way as shallograms are not fossils. Trilobites are not fossils, which we can just find a trilobite. Here, let me show you this trilobite in South America. I think it's around these lakes. Or this lake. There it is. Here's this lake. Here's this trilobite. Eye and all. Another decomposed eye that seems to have had like two nodes almost with a separation. Two different types of rock, like positive and negative material. Where this one is still stable, so it hasn't like, it's maybe like a yin yang thing going on, where this one broke apart. This one has a nice heart at its third eye too. Crazy. Side of a volcano. Trilobite. So like, maybe ammonites. I'm not sure where I have it. There's that trilobite again. Here's another. This one's real interesting. Surroundings, and then it has like a. It looks like a sideways droplet. Like if you were to freeze a droplet of water that's just in 3 dimensions, goes upward, but in 2 dimensions. It like goes sideways this way. Like there's something here. But this is in Bolivia somewhere. 2267 coordinates. But I'm trying to find Florida stuff. It's probably here. Specifically this one. This one. This one makes me think of this structure. Like, this is a supernova. This is a nova. It's not a coral reef, although maybe it is on a different scale, and that's what's crazy about it all. Like, a different rate of, like, this nova of this system that is a star. That nova, on its perception of time, was a coral reef, and, like, all these things were living. Maybe, like trilobites. Maybe they lived, experienced a time so like elongated that it, in their perception of time, would have been like hundreds of millions of years since they existed. But in our perception of time, it's only thousands. Maybe. But in our perception of time, this is a nova and is not a coral reef at all. And there's a lot of things of this nature that are just like, like for instance, this structure, it looks kind of like a tree, but we can tell it's not a tree. It also has these here. But if it were to be smaller, if it were to be like the microscopic, if we found this same exact structure microscopically, it would be deemed a fossil. But it's not a fossil because it's not a fossil. And the same thing goes for things that are deemed fossils in many instances like this. Like this is considered a fossil, but really it's like a lens that was focusing particles through it and creating like a spray, like something like physics only was occurring here, not a living system. It's most pronounced in shallograms, but and like here's a shallogram in Hawaii. Like these structures. Garden of the Gods. From this YouTube channel. Sorry, I can't really tell what it says. Hikes with Sean, maybe, I think is what it was. I have referenced it, but I don't know. A nova, like this is the surface of a star frozen in a rock. Not the same as science describes it. But it is the case. So what I'm thinking here is these are related, and this reminds me a lot. These like channels where water flowed, as they point out, like there was some sort of like fluid flowing through the layers here that was being caused to flow through it, that then here really seemed a supernova. Like it froze from the center outward. They said it would be like a lava tube. It compared to a lava tube, it's called a rosette. Compared to a lava tube, it would be considered to cool from the outside in, which is what a lava tube would do. But these, based on the data on them, the analysis of them, they did the opposite, which is almost like it's supernova. Like maybe space itself flowed into the rock. The ether particles in subtle particles in substantial quantities that formed a stable region here that essentially cooled the rock rapidly to cause it to just explode within the still like cooling rock around it. Because essentially this storm is bringing cold, like ether space energy, tendrils into the Deccan Traps and just feeding little particles into being, or channels into being, that are odd and anomalous, and interestingly bringing water along with it. This paper demonstrates that water is present in the process for sure. And this is small scale. Like even on the small scale, we see these little dendrite things with like 90-degree angles. Very reminiscent of this oddity, although it's not quite the same, where this is where like nova after nova occurred under Australia, when Australia was positioned here, which I talk about in detail. It had a nucleus more here. Here's Australia, the northern edge, southern boundary. And it had a nucleus more up here when it was actually part of like Papua New Guinea and its adjacent polygons. But the current flowing out here across from Dwarka, under Europe into North America, across along the southern boundary between North America and South America, which was right here, which left behind a chunk of its undercrust right there. This is not part of it anymore because it's still attached to North America. and the current flowed this way, and it just was caused to come out here, where then it just swirled in this region where Australia is. But none of this existed yet. All this continent, all the oceanic crust out here is formed later. But so this swirling was occurring here. And then it started to like branch. So we can kind of see. Interestingly, Australia was getting hit by multiple currents. Had another current coming in from this side. That current was coming in from over here. Like, anyway, it caused a bunch of novas here, which then seemed to have caused like this trident-looking thing. It's not quite trident-y, these dendrites, but maybe related in some way to like some process that's just not quite the same, but is similar. Similar steps, but not the same recipe. Like, it's different recipe overall to make the trident, but similar steps in the dendrites, these things occurring. Especially that one, which they call a skeleton spine or something. Just aptly named. Also, I believe, based on their pictures here, none of the rosettes, none of the rosettes show the structure above it in their paper. To see like if there is this like chevron thing here. But it seems like based on their depictions here that chevrons and rosettes are correlated. Okay, so I'll be back. I don't know what this video was about, but hopefully it's something. It's something. Alright. Till next time.